On a recent podcast, Sophie declared that Caitlin Clark should operate as the linchpin of the Indiana Fever offense. She drew a bold comparison to LeBron's prime. When you have a generational player, she deserves control over the playbook. That statement straightforward, basketball logic lit up social media. Turned teammates and fans against her, exposed a deeper fracture between old guard loyalty and the new era of stardom Clark represents. Sophie didn't couch her opinion in euphemisms. She said it plainly. When a player changes tempo, energy, everything, your system should adapt to her. She looked back on moments in games when it was clear the offense flowed best when it ran through Caitlin. She wasn't attacking, it was basketball sense spoken from experience. But because it came from inside the locker room, it was received as a declaration of war. Within hours, clips from the podcast were everywhere. Some praised Sophie for the courage to speak truth. Others accused her of stirring drama, of undermining chemistry, even of trying to ride Caitlin's spotlight for clicks. Caitlin Clark fans, surprisingly, were among the harshest critics. They said Sophie should have kept her thoughts private, that speaking on it publicly would hurt Clark, inject doubt into the offense, weaken trust. Yet Sophie had been in that system. She'd shared the floor with Caitlin through growing pains, understood what made her tick. Her view wasn't speculative, it came from the court. But in today's climate, context rarely matters. The moment becomes soundbite. The soundbite becomes controversy. Some argued Sophie was demanding control for herself. Others accused her of blaming teammates, of airing dirty laundry. But in her full comments, she never attacked anyone. She simply said, when you have a generational talent, you design your system to fit her strengths. In a perfect world, that's basketball 101. But in the WNBA's neon-lit era of branding, that kind of honesty is risky. The backlash was raw and virulent. Comment threads accused her of being tone-deaf, self-promoting, disrespectful. They scooped up every phrase, should have control, run through her system, and twisted them into defensive ammunition. What made this fight uglier was the double standard. When male stars command systems, it's praised as elite leadership. When a woman says the same, she's labeled disruptive. Sophie's case highlighted that polarizing gap. She spoke about offense, about roles, about how a team flows around a superstar. But to many, her voice was the crime. Some TikTok takes called her a drama magnet, others said she was destabilizing the locker room. And some insidious ones touched on race and confidence in ways subtle and ugly, as if confidence alone had become a threat. Still, Sophie didn't apologize. She didn't justify herself. She didn't engage the chaos. She played basketball, showed up to practice, posted a quiet line or two about truth, not fearing the spotlight. She refused to be silenced. That silence became its own rebuke to the outrage. And slowly, public opinion began to shift. Maybe she wasn't the villain. Maybe she was the one who told the truth. A turning moment came when an old highlight resurfaced. In a heated game, Sophie stood between Caitlin and a rival, absorbing contact to protect her teammate. The crowd remembered. The highlight reminded everyone, Sophie was never an outsider. She took hits, fought for balance, guarded Clark when no one asked her to. That context reframed things. Her honesty didn't look like betrayal. It looked like courage. Some colleagues and analysts quietly backed her, saying the league needed smarter voices. One or two commentators reversed tone, admitting that the split-second offense looked better when Caitlin had more control, giving credence to Sophie's point. Inside circles, people wondered if the WNBA could start to appreciate blunt voices rather than penalize them. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark remained silent. She made no statement about Sophie's remarks, offered no defense nor denouncement. That silence was loud. Some interpreted it as agreement, others as disapproval. Fans parsed every sentence she spoke thereafter for hints, waiting for cracks in her posture. But she stayed above the noise. That too felt intentional. Inside the Fever locker room, tension thickened. Some players sympathized with Sophie, acknowledging that the offense often stuttered when it strayed from Caitlin's rhythm. Others felt Sophie's comments had exposed internal frictions better left buried. Trust, always delicate in pro sports, felt strained. Coaches tried to shift the narrative back to development and execution. But when the media scrambles in on personal statements, games become second priority. In time, the controversy morphed. It wasn't about one opinion anymore. It became a flashpoint for how women in sports are allowed or not allowed to speak. Sophie had not leaked schemes or criticized teammates. She simply articulated what many thought. A superstar deserves a system built around her. But because she spoke from within, she was made into a villain. Still, Sophie stood by herself. She resumed her podcast, posted with quiet confidence, continued to compete. She didn't cower. Her critics multiplied, but so did her supporters' fans, who appreciated honesty. Younger players who saw in her the courage to speak publicly about basketball, not just image. And slowly, her reputation began to bend back toward respect. Some calls for her to be traded or silenced faded. The story became less about conflict and more about what happens when the game's dynamics change and tradition resists. By the time the season resumed, Sophie's name no longer just denoted controversy. It represented change. A reminder that speaking your mind in a public sport sometimes means being misunderstood before you're understood. Her outspokenness forced the league and the fans to wrestle with the very culture it promotes: branding, control, identity. In that sense, her words did more than stir debate. They held up a mirror. What do you think? Was Sophie Cunningham wrong to speak openly about the Wildcats' offense? Or was she right to say what needed to be said? Should superstars like Caitlin Clark demand control? Or should teams resist that for balance? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories that dig deep into sports, culture, and power, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell.